Okay, well, let's begin. Welcome everybody to Auburn University's contribution to this series of interactive sessions that are done under the auspices of the NOBCChE Collaborative. My name is Vincent Ortiz, and I'm from the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at Auburn University. Before beginning, I'd like to thank Ashley Wallace for the technical support that she has provided, the kinds of organizational services. Without her, this wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Okay, what we're going to be doing here is talking about some of the things in the flyer that was distributed recently about how to make it happen, this whole business of getting a PhD in chemistry. Of course, Auburn University has its unique perspective on how that can be done and how that affects people who come from a variety of different backgrounds. But before we get to that, let's have a few introductions here from part of the Auburn delegation. At least to one side of me on this screen is the chairman of our recruiting committee. So I think that he can introduce himself directly. Conrad?
Hi, I'm Conrad Patkowski, also from Auburn University. I will be around to answer together with Professor Ortiz any questions about especially our graduate application process. And we have a few more people here from Auburn who are also eager to answer questions, especially our grad students are a great source of information, but I'll leave it to Dr. Ortiz to make introductions.
Let's see, another member of our faculty has joined us also. That's Professor Byron Farnham.
Hi, everyone. Byron Farnham here. So I'm an assistant professor in chemistry. I'm an inorganic chemist by training, but I've served on the graduate admissions committee for our department for 4 of the 5 years that I've been here. So I have a lot of experience reading applications and sort of knowing what makes a good application, also what makes a good student in our department, and sort of what it takes to get a PhD and things. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Let's see, next what I'd like to do is to introduce the president of our local NOBCChE chapter, which has been around since 2008, but Gemonica Moore hasn't been around since 2008. She's about to finish her PhD. Gemonica?
Hi, everyone. My name is Gemonica Moore. I am a current 4th-year PhD student. As you can tell, I am in the lab, so work never stops for me. But I am here to answer any questions about the PhD program that you guys may have, or application format, and transition from undergraduate to graduate school, and how it is being here at Auburn or any graduate school that you might apply to.
I might add that Gemonica Moore is not kidding when she says that the work never stops. We have experienced during Gemonica's presidency of the NOBCChE chapter a very impressive growth in the total number of members that we have. Gemonica is always at it, and NOBCChE has never been so prosperous as now at Auburn University. Okay, let's see. I think that there may be Philip Pavlovsky, I think, has also joined us as well, another member of the faculty. Philip, just say hi.
Right. Hello, guys. My name is Philip Pavlovsky. I'm an assistant research professor in Dr. Ortiz's group, and I'm not on any of those committees, but in our group we have had many students, across different cultural backgrounds, and we've always been enjoying working with students of different cultural backgrounds. I myself also enjoyed being engaged in such activities. And guys, I'm not formally yet the member of NOBCChE, but I think the time is right that I joined these wonderful efforts.
Well, in fact, Dr. Pavlovsky has been instrumental in setting up a lot of our students from HBCUs who come to participate in our REU, and that's been going on for about 3 years now.
Right.
Let's see. Another person from Auburn, who's an undergraduate, actually, someone who's a prospective graduate student, might be interested in this topic, is Claire King. Claire?
Hey guys, I was in Dr. Ortiz's research meeting, and he talked about this, and I knew a couple names and faces, so I decided to join and see what it's about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Well, anyway, that is the local team. And so what I'm going to do right now is start sharing a presentation I have, but I hope that this is very informal. I hope that I am repeatedly interrupted by questions, remarks, even suggestions. So let's get on with that. I'm going to share the screen that I have here. Can everybody see it now? Can everybody see the title page?
Mhm.
Okay. So we decided to entitle this little presentation, Your Doctorate in Chemistry or Biochemistry, How to Make It Happen. And you can see inside of those distorted pentagons, the Auburn University logo and Aubie the tiger. Of course, Auburn is very much into athletics and that kind of thing. But in a way, we are in a competitive environment for talent, just like a football team. And we think of all of you out there, the people who are going to be applying for our program, as being the blue chips that we want to recruit onto our team. And just for everyone's benefit, if you want to contact me, you can see my email address at the bottom there. My website is on that second line from the bottom. And the homepage for our department as a whole, which has a lot of information, is indicated on this line back here. But if anyone has any kind of questions that they want to reserve for later, feel free to get in contact with me. That's the reason why I've put all this information there. Okay, so let's proceed here. And let's see, I guess that we can have. All right, so the first question that I posed in the flyer is, what do you do in a PhD program? And in a way, if you look at this in this kind of dry, detached way, you could say, well, there are requirements for getting a PhD, and they're pretty well known. Things like courses, credits, written exams, oral exams, writing a dissertation, a final defense, all those kinds of things are typical parts of requirements. And if you want, you can go to our webpage and click on where it says a graduate handbook for the graduate students, where all these things are laid out. You may also be aware that there are support mechanisms that are provided as well for graduate students. They are either on teaching or research assistantships. They will be engaged in undergraduate labs and discussions as part of those teaching responsibilities. They'll be grading tests, all kinds of things like that that accompany a teaching assistantship. And of course, the research assistantships are people who are doing research which pertains to their doctoral dissertations. For example, at Auburn, there's like 5 years of guaranteed support that you have under the auspices of one or the other. But I would say that these are just the requirements, the support, the bare bones. None of it really captures the experience of graduate school. What I like to emphasize to people, and you're going to discover in the course of this presentation, this is a highly personal presentation. This is one person's point of view on what graduate school really is. A PhD program, in my view, is a license to learn. A license to learn in the sense that you are in the midst of a community that has all kinds of physical and intellectual resources that you can call on to advance yourself educationally. And there are lots of components to this. Graduate students do a lot of reading and writing. They do a lot of listening and discussing and interacting with other people. So all these modes of communication are very, very much in evidence. It's really part of the experience. And because of that, because it is interactive, there's a great deal of observing that goes on, observing what your peers are doing, learning from them, practicing the skills that they have, growing in that respect. And as a result of all this intellectual activity, you are progressing, but at the same time, while you're doing all that, it's being facilitated. It's being facilitated because you're building relationships with science, of course, and with scientists, but also with your peers, your fellow graduate students, and the undergraduate students that you teach. I might add, you learn a great deal of chemistry by teaching. So the goal of all of this, the thing that ends up with a newly minted PhD, is the development of the capacity to generate new knowledge and to communicate it. And that last part is very important because without it, the first part just doesn't mean as much. And again, at this point, from my colleagues, anybody who wants to chime in and make a comment or something like that, I encourage that. I hope this is as interactive as possible. Okay, so that's what we mean by what one is done, what one is doing in a PhD program. Okay, so here's the next question. Choosing the right school and the right advisor. That's something which is gauged, I would say, primarily by looking at the following things. What you want to do, in my view, is to choose an institution that is committed to your professional and personal advancement, to your intellectual growth, and to your future as a scientist. Now, not long ago, I guess it was just actually within the last half hour, I've told people what the NOBCChE acronym stands for. It stands for the National Organization for the Professional Advancement of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. Notice that professional advancement is part of the acronym that was cut out, but it really is important because in fact, that's really what you're looking for in a graduate school. You're looking for an environment which is going to allow you to advance educationally. A place where you can try things, grow, and be confident that you're going to be supported in those efforts. So here's some questions to ask yourself. There may be some others that others would occur to other people too. But one thing that I like to advise my undergraduates on, especially if they're applying to graduate school, is ask yourself after a visit or a contact or something like that, will you become a true collaborator with your advisor by the end of this process? Is this a person who respects you, who wants to cultivate another intellect, another mind? That's a question to ask. Of course, answering it in any kind of definitive way is a difficult thing to do because these involve interpersonal relationships and the subtle judgments and clues that we get to the behavior of other people, but it's important. Another question I think that is a good one to pose to yourself is, will you be part of a stimulating, supportive environment for learning? Now that's something which can be gauged by talking with prospective advisors or looking at the characteristics of a particular graduate program. But once again, I would say that the kinds of things that one can learn from one's fellow students or from other students who are already in the program or who are already in a given research group can be revelatory. And I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. Another question, will you be able to count on the support and advice of your advisor and members of your committee? Is this an environment, again, where one can go with questions, where one can go with guidance, where one can count on the faith that other people have in you as an individual? All of these things, I think, go into making the right choice when it comes to this question. Again, I invite people to add their own perspectives and to ask questions or to make any comments that they think are appropriate. Okay, so this is a big decision. Let me see, I guess there's someone trying to be admitted here. There we are. Okay. A question that I'm often asked is, what qualities are graduate programs looking for? well, obviously, and I think that people have the idea that, well, they're looking for people who have very good grades and very good board scores. Okay, those are certainly to the good. But I would ask you, in answering this question, to consider this following equation. Of course, it's not really a serious equation in the sense that I don't have numerical values at hand for any of the variables I'm declaring here. But I like to say it in this way, that A is equal to I exponential dt, where A is achievement. And of course, achievement is what we expect to see out of a PhD student, the things that result in a dissertation, papers, talks at symposia, things like that. That's what I mean by achievements, or a higher level of knowledge, of course, is an achievement too. But that's going to be the product of, yes, intellect goes into it. I would say the things we think of as being, I don't know, some kind of talent, very, very difficult to define. But the exponential factor has an argument which depends upon diligence and time. Those are the things that really end up telling at the end of 5 years in graduate school. Diligence multiplied by time. And what do I mean by diligence? Of course, diligence reflects a commitment to a particular pursuit, but also a willingness to learn. And when I say willingness, I don't mean something very similar to commitment necessarily. What I mean is openness to learning, being teachable, being able to perceive things, to see opportunities, to interact with people who may be a little different in the sense of the backgrounds they have, but also the skills and experiences that they have. There's an old quotation from the famous British actor, Laurence Olivier, which I think captures this in many respects. Keep your eyes open and get on with it. Okay, next.
Hey, Vince,
Yeah, Byron, go ahead.
I can add something to that. Go back to that slide, please.
Sure.
So yeah, I like the mathematical approach to all of this. And I would just echo that diligence really is important because, you know, one thing you will realize in a PhD program is that, you know, most of the reactions that you try or the things that you do will not necessarily be, you know, slam dunks. Everything's not going to work out perfectly. If it did, it would take us 6 months to get a PhD. You know, you'd come in, say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Everything works perfect and we're done. Here's my PhD, you know. It really is I don't mean to use trial and error as a term that we're just sort of guessing and there's nothing guiding it, but science is a learning process, and the way that you push new boundaries of science is you try something no one's ever tried before. You don't know what's going to happen. You make a hypothesis about it, but you have to keep trying those things. And one thing that is important is you have to have some resiliency and some diligence towards working at that problem and that willingness to keep going, because you know you could come in the first year and feel like you didn't really get a lot done. And then sometimes you look back and you go, oh, well, actually, you know, I learned how to do this reaction and I learned how to do this reaction, and that set me up to do the one that actually worked, you know. A lot of different chemistry areas, even with, you know, just within our department, you know, it's multidisciplinary to the point that there are a lot of different physical skills that everyone has to learn. So when I say sort of performing a chemical reaction, I mean like a chemist that's at a bench and you're adding reagent A and reagent B and you're heating it, and you know you could do that same reaction 10 different ways and it only worked one of those ways, because the order in which you did it and the rate that you heated the reaction and all of these little things matter, and it takes doing that reaction many, many times to understand and appreciate all of those elements. And so sometimes the whole kind of failure thing is not necessarily that you were going about it in the wrong way. It was just you had to learn what really mattered. And that's really what, you know, at the end of the day, when we write a thesis, that's kind of what you're conveying is, you know, you're telling everybody else, hey, I set off into this journey into the woods and I didn't know where the path was, but I found it. And now you don't have to do that anymore. You can just follow that path. You know, this is how you have to do it. This is what really matters to, you know, synthesize the right molecule or whatever the goal of the chemistry is. But it really is about the journey getting there, I find. And as part of that, as Vince said, I mean, the diligence is huge, and that can oftentimes outweigh, you know, any sort of intellectual term that is in front of that.
Right.
Right. And probably a different way of looking at that, just different angle. One could say that you know, sometimes, at least sometimes it was my impression before I joined a graduate program, was that people in graduate school, they are just looking for geniuses, right? Which I am obviously not. But this is not the case. Actually, of course, you should have a kind of inclination towards a certain subject you're going to work on, but it's all really the result of hard work. So actually, it's hardworking people that graduate programs are really interested in. So if you feel like, you know, often we computational theoretical chemists are asked, oh, well, it's interesting, but probably you have to, you know, have like 100 years of programming experience, or, you know, being genius in mathematics or something like that. No, I mean, this comes, all those skills come with experience, and this diligence factor in Dr. Ortiz's equation is really extremely important. And Dr. Ortiz also put this nice quote for Lawrence Oliver. I also would like to add a quote. You see, in our group, we are using Gaussian software, wonderful software that can actually also lead to depicting orbitals and things like that. You can explain chemical phenomena by that. But Gaussian software always at the very end of calculations, it prints a file called output file. It prints a quote from something. And a quote, I can't remember now the author, I'm sorry for that, but I remember someone said that ideas are like rabbits. You get a couple of them, and soon after you get a lot of those. And this is, again, a function of time, and also a function of diligence, or time multiplied by diligence, because if you have your eyes open, as this quote here by Lawrence Oliver says, you quickly start getting ideas. So again, good ideas in science, it's not really a matter of being a genius, but having your eyes open, being curious, and working hard. That's how these ideas are born.
Right. Yes, indeed. Good discussion, everybody. And you know, if we have time at the end, remind me of the hockey stick.
Okay.
Not the climate hockey stick, but there's another hockey stick that we got to talk about too. Okay, let's go on. Okay, getting the best recommendations from just the right people. People sometimes curious about this. This is who should recommend me, or how do I get this kind of backing? Well, cultivate relationships while you're an undergraduate. Let these folks know you well. Of course, one of the best ways you could do that is to undertake a research project. You'll have a research supervisor. Those people usually write very persuasive recommendation letters. Former instructors, of course, people that you, again, that if you've gotten to know that instructor well, so much the better for the letter that can be written. And of course, academic advisors come into the mix too. I'd like to give you a couple examples of how this sort of thing worked out for me, in my research group. These are a couple of Mexican fellows who did their PhD with me within the last few years. Hector Hernandez Corso, who you can see, I actually have him in the middle position there with the blue and striped shirt, was recommended by one of my collaborators in Mexico, Marcelo Galvan. This person knew Hector well, knew about the research that he had done as an undergraduate there, and as a result, the connection was made. He ended up doing a very nice dissertation. Same kind of thing with Manuel Diaz. Manuel Diaz Tinoco got his PhD about a year later. And this was a person who was recommended by a former postdoc of mine, who's now a faculty member in Guadalajara, in Mexico. Both of these people came with a really good commitment, but you know, it was pretty evident to me at the very start that these were some people who could really do well if they were properly cultivated. And both of them have gone on to take postdoctoral fellows in very prestigious institutions. Okay, so let's go on to the next thing. Your first semester in graduate school, making the most of it. Okay, the first semester in graduate school is unlike anything else because you're being a teacher and a learner at the same time, especially if you're in a teaching assistantship. So that's going to be the life of a first-year graduate student is the most typical case. Again, I say, keep your eyes open, learn from others, respond to opportunities. That could take a lot of different forms, just learning about different research groups, learning about not only what the advisor says about them, but what those graduate students in that group say about it. Any kind of chance you have to do, let's say, rotations, or let's say special, let's say, sessions in which you learn about instrumentation or some kind of technique, take it. It will broaden your horizons. It will give you a better idea about how to go about doing things later on. Building relationships, very important as well, obviously with members of the faculty and your fellow graduate students, but staff as well. I think that very often that people who are taking courses while they're in graduate school, and that's a typical type of thing, regard it as kind of like an extension of the things that they were doing as undergraduates. But just remember that someone who's teaching a graduate course knows that the graduate students in that course are committed to that field. And so questions that you have about the things that you're learning in a graduate course that pertain to the greater context of chemistry, or perhaps the research that you think you might do, those are things that you can really learn about with your instructor. And that instructor, of course, is going to be very interested in telling you about that because you're a prospective student. So don't forget about that. As people who are in those graduate courses very often have requested to do that because they want to meet graduate students. Okay, the choice of a research group is one of the biggest professional decisions you will ever make. But, and that sounds so momentous and so serious, but while you're making that big decision, respect your own thoughts and feelings. And by that, I mean your own, not those of others. You're preparing yourself for a long career. Think about what you really aspire to do. And keep the long run in mind. Again, I said that graduate school is a license to learn. Well, as long as you have that license, lay the groundwork for a long and successful career, something that will give you depth as well as versatility. Okay, let's see. Okay, application procedure. This is the website you can go to initiate things. That's an online application form, which can be submitted by email. There's no application fee at Auburn. Transcripts of all post-secondary education are needed. Have 3 references, and those can be sent by email as well. The GRE is not required. Let's see, Conrad, have I missed anything here?
I think that's all the pieces. One point that I wanted to make is that you might already know the research group that you would like to work for. That's fantastic. If you don't worry. We will give you plenty of informed decisions. But no matter if you have chosen a group or not, and which group you have chosen, the application procedure is the same, so that you can be admitted to the graduate program at the department. And the final decisions regarding which group you will join are made sometime your first semester, so sometime your first fall semester at Auburn. So I'm sure that it's great to contact potential supervisors before you come in, and they will be super happy to respond, as was mentioned in the chat discussion. But no matter which group you pick, your application will go through the same procedure. And when you're admitted and come to campus in August, you will still have a chance to make make your final decision, which is, as Professor Ortiz said, a very important one, which group to join. So we don't hold you accountable for your first preference. We still want to we want you to make an informed decision once you're here, once you have a chance to talk to all people involved, not just faculty, but graduate students as well.
I'll add that one piece of advice I always give students is to whatever grad program you're looking at, there can be lots of decisions that factor into that, why you're choosing a certain program, but you're going to be doing research with an advisor for an extended period of time. You certainly want to make a decision that's right for you, but even applying to the program, I like to tell students to have at least maybe 2 to 3 people who they could see themselves working for. You can have like, wow, I really want to work for this person. I really love their research, but sometimes you might get there and that person's funding just ran out, or their group size is maxed out or something, and these sort of things happen. And you basically want to have some other options there. So I would definitely look around the department for wherever you're looking. And the other thing is that to be intentional when you write your essays and things for your application packages. It asks you to write a personal statement and things. Like for ours, it would be common with other applications as well. The more that a student says, I really like this person's research, I like this aspect of it, whatever they mention, if they mention a faculty member by name, that makes a strong impression on me that the student has really done their homework. They're not saying, oh, I heard Auburn was good at football, so I want to go to grad school there. They've actually, researched the chemistry that's being done and have some interest in it. We obviously don't expect you to know exactly what we're doing because you don't have a PhD yet. You haven't even gotten here. But showing that interest by putting someone's name in your application can help you, I think.
Yeah, just to add to that briefly. So when I was applying to graduate schools, I did the personal statements. I was going to ask if we still do it because it's been about 4 years since I applied. But during that personal statement, it is really good, like Dr. Farnham has said, to be as personal as possible. I mentioned 3 professors in there. And out of those 3 professors, only one was actually taking students. So obviously I didn't reach out to those 2 professors. I reached out to the one who was actually doing research. And out of the 3 professors, I actually didn't go with either one of them for my final research project that I'm doing currently. So like he said, do 2 to 3 that you possibly want to work with, because you never know once you actually get there if you're going to agree with the person's research, or you're going to like their style of teaching or anything like that. So don't get to the school and be stuck there or feel like you're stuck and you can't go anywhere because you've applied and didn't know that the person wouldn't actually have research available for you, or their mentoring style wasn't agreeable with what you wanted.
I also would add that a graduate student, in addition to choosing an advisor, will also choose members of a supervisory committee. And all the members of that committee are supposed to be good resource people for the student. So building something like that is important too. Okay, let's go on. Tips for a successful application. Okay. Rank your preferred areas of chemistry and biochemistry and identify specific research groups you might like to join. So we've heard about that point. Tell us about your undergraduate research experience, internships, industrial experience, teaching experience. These types of things can be really important too. I mean, one of the students that I mentioned to you already, Manuel Diaz-Tinoco, this is a person who came with a background in which he had actually been out doing chemical sales and let's say equipment maintenance kinds of things for a long period of time. He was very well versed in many, many aspects of chemistry that considerably strengthened his application. Okay, make sure you get a recommendation letter from your undergraduate research supervisor. And of course, it goes without saying that doing undergraduate research is a huge advantage in this respect. And there's no such thing as a minimum GPA or minimum GRE score. We always consider entire applications. So these are the things to keep in mind. Okay, next.
Yeah, I really couldn't stress this last point strong enough, because the graduate school, you will be taking some classes your first 2 years probably. You will be done with your classes after second year of grad school, and it's really not so much about taking classes. So we're really primarily interested in how you perform in a lab, and that's why we want to hear about all kinds of undergraduate research, internship, teaching experience, not just classes, because really your GPA is not a very good predictor of success in grad school. That has been documented, since the most important part will be your own work in the lab, and that's for us the better piece of information for us to try to see how well we can expect you to perform is your experience in anywhere outside class, in particular in undergraduate
Right.
research. It doesn't
Right.
have to be in an academic setting. It can be the job you held between undergraduates, between college and right now. It can be some part-time internship, anything like that. We'd really like to know your experience.
Okay. Research directions at Auburn. Request our brochure. We can put it into your hands. This is an example of a brochure which tells us about the research interests of different members of the faculty, has some more detailed information about the nature of the graduate program. So I think that that's something that you can also learn about by visiting our website too. But one way or another, do learn about these things. I think that you'll find it to be a profitable investment of time. Okay, well, once you arrive on campus, what can you expect? All graduate students receive a stipend, which is about $26,000 per year. So that's the support which is provided typically through a teaching assistantship, and thereafter maybe with either a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship. Tuition is waived, and the GTA, the graduate teaching assistantship, is offered for 5 years. The fees, health insurance and so forth, about $2,800 a year total. Auburn is not an expensive place to live. It's a small college town. And I think that our students typically will, there are many, many students who double up in an apartment or something like that, but they certainly don't have to do so in order to live comfortably. You'll be a GTA in your first year, and either a GTA or GRA in subsequent years. And the teaching load, that is to say, the obligations that you actually have as a teaching assistant, are about 20 hours a week in the spring and the fall semesters. And first year students usually teach fewer labs in the fall, spring, but they can teach in the summer too. Okay, so those are the things that go along with the assistantships. Okay, what to expect your first semester? I would say 3 core graduate classes taken from this menu: analytical chemistry, biochemistry, computational chemistry, inorganic, organic, and physical chemistry. And then after that, 4 more advanced classes later on. And there is considerable flexibility in our program as to what those courses could be. We have a great deal of flexibility. We've had people take courses outside of the department. All kinds of mixtures of things are possible. Teaching labs, again, about 20 hours a week. And you pick a research group before the end of the first semester. And as we've emphasized before, this is an important decision. So use all of your personal resources, intellectual as well as heartfelt, to make that decision. Okay. And so I'll end the regular part of the presentation with a question. Do you need more information? If so, just ask us. I hope we have made clear the contacts that you can make. Contact the professor whose research seems the most exciting to you. You can ask our current graduate students. Contact information for them is also available on our website, which is worth checking out. When we extend an offer to you, we'll be happy to invite you for a visit. We find that when people visit Auburn, that they really tend to come back for sometimes for a long time. So you can email the chairman of the Department Recruiting Committee. That's Dr. Patkowski, and his email address is right down there at the bottom. Okay, so these are the remarks that I wanted to make to everybody in this presentation. I hope that people have enjoyed them. I hope they found them informative and profitable. And at this point, I think that what I'd like to do is stop this share here and open up the floor for questions and comments. I guess that there is a question here about prospective international students. Conrad, anything that is of particular interest to international students that you want to comment on? Turn on the mic.
So the application procedure, if you're an international student, does work very much the same. And I dropped a link to the application procedure in the chat. Now, one additional requirement compared to students who got domestic students who got an undergraduate degree from a US institution is some kind of test of English language proficiency, unless you're coming from a country that where English is an official language. Then the graduate school requires some test of English proficiency. Now I know that TEFL was the most traditional one, and it's unfortunately expensive. And in the pandemic, it's in many places harder to get to the place that that offers it right now. Because of the COVID pandemic, I know that several of other options are open. One is IELTS, but also there's a Duolingo test, and several of these can be taken online at home and don't require going to and scheduling a test at one of the centers, but you need one of these. You still don't need GRE. We are done with GRE completely, but the only additional piece of application materials you need is the test of English proficiency. Now we understand that if you are an international student, you do need to go through the whole visa process. And of course, once you are admitted to the department, we will make it happen by supplying all the necessary paperwork. It's just that it takes time, especially right now during the pandemic in different countries. We've really tried to be fair and accommodating to all kinds of delays. So of course, some of our international graduate students couldn't join us in August 2020, well, because you couldn't travel to the US in August 2020, or you couldn't get a visa. So we did not withdraw any of the offers, of course, and we are patient, and a few of these people were able to come in on campus right now in spring 2021, and if they couldn't, they can still start in fall 2021, when I'm really hoping some of the pandemic restrictions will be at least partially over. So it does take more time just because of the whole visa application process. In fact, we don't have a strict cutoff date for when we stop evaluating graduate applications, but if you're an international student, I think now it's a really good time to make sure that we do have all your application materials. So then right now it's not time to postpone getting anything to us. If you're a domestic student, we have a little bit more flexibility time-wise, but since our admissions committee is making admissions decision right now, I think it's a good time to get all of your materials together around this time of the year.
At this point, I'd like to see if our colleagues at HBCUs have any questions or comments. I was thinking of Michelle or Bakar perhaps jumping in at this point. Is there anything that you would like to add to the remarks that we've made so far.
This is Michelle from Hampshire University, and
Hi, Michelle.
I guess a question that kind of popped in my mind. I know you talked about the first semester, but what is the progression from graduate student status to PhD candidate? Do you have like in-house, proposals they have to do, or do they have to pass so many tests in subject areas?
How about if we have Byron answer that one?
Okay, great question. So some programs will have something called a cumulative exam. They sometimes call them CUMES. Others will have an oral exam, and maybe some even have both. The way we do it here at Auburn is we have an oral exam, and we have a written research proposal, which is sort of a component of that. And that's meant to assess your writing, communication, and your oral communication skills. So the way that works is we say that by the end of your, I think it's like they say 7th semester, but basically it's the fall of your 3rd year. Okay, so you basically go 2 full years through, and the idea is that somewhere within that 2nd year, that calendar year, from January to December, that you would write a research proposal based on your research that you're doing. Okay, you basically compile the data you've collected so far, present some sort of hypothesis about where you're going, how this data, how you're going to draw some conclusions from that, and what more research you're going to do that's going to build to be a thesis, sort of like a blueprint for your thesis. You submit that to your committee, which you would have chosen at the end of your 1st year, and your committee reviews that and accepts it or asks you to rewrite it if there are issues with writing style or with technical information, whatever. It's sort of a back and forth process. Once that is approved, then you will schedule an oral exam where you will basically give the spoken version of that proposal in the format of a PowerPoint presentation or like a chalk talk on a whiteboard or something. And you'll describe your data and your ideas, and your committee will sort of ask you to defend them. We sort of ask for, we may probe kind of general science knowledge, and then we may probe something very specific to your research. But the idea is we really want to see that the student can really kind of stand firm with their data and can kind of reason their way through a problem to show that they're really ready to be a PhD candidate.
We have a related question, which came from Ronnie Richardson Matthews to Gemonica Moore. And Ronnie asked Gemonica, how was the transition from an undergraduate level of work to a PhD level? And what were the ways you managed this transition? This is sort of on the same subject. I wonder if Gemonica has a response.
Hey, yeah, so I actually did not have a traditional undergraduate career. I did not do research because the school I went to HBCU, but unfortunately back in that time, they would not allow people who were pre-med to do research. They reserved that for people who were specific majors for general chemistry or general biology. So I did summer research, which showed me how to actually do research. And then I did a postbac. And that postbac was a year long, just research in the lab, actually similar to like a graduate student. I took courses, I had undergraduates I worked with as well. So it was a simulated graduate program. Transitioning from that into the graduate program probably was easier for me because I knew everything as far as like technique wise, but it was hard because I was expecting to kind of hit the ground running, and that was not the way it was. That first semester, like they said, you do classes, you're teaching, it's totally different from actually doing research. And then the second semester, you actually get into your lab. And so the expectations for it is you're an independent researcher, you have your supervisor, you go back and confirm with them your data, you confirm where you need to go as far as like your transitional work. But as far as planning experiments, your time in the lab, it's all up to you. It also depends on your supervisor. They might have a schedule that they want you to set out, so many papers they want you to read, it just depends. So transitioning from it. It depends on the school, it depends on the professor. It's not as hard as you think. It's just an adjustment for anything. If you're starting a job, that's how it is. Every boss is going to have different expectations. You just have to go in with the knowledge and the mindset that I'm willing to work, I'm willing to learn, and I'm malleable. So whatever you want to show me, whatever you expect from me, I'm willing to do it within reason. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
I hope that answers it.
That's you know, a good account. Bakar, was there something you wanted to?
Yes, I have a question for you guys, and thank you very much for putting this together. And I think it gave a good insight of what students will expect in the application process, and also when they are in there, what are some of the expectations that they need to be successful. Whenever we have students go to graduate school, there is definitely the advisor who is the primary mentor. But in some cases, there might be some extra mentorship to identify problems that any student might be having. I was wondering what does that system looks like in Auburn, and also how does it support students effectively to identify problems that they might be having with any advisor before it gets into out of hands?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'll tell you that the whole business of mentorship is something that is being discussed in a lot of different organizations, a lot of different forums these days. And I suppose that it is something which can be systematized and improved. But this is one of the reasons why I posed all those questions at the beginning of my talk, because I really do think that as a research advisor, if you're going to take on someone as a PhD student, you have to believe in that person. You have to be that person's advocate. You have to be the person who wants to advance that person educationally and in a career sense as well. And I suppose that there are times where that kind of relationship is missing to the detriment of all concerned. At Auburn, I would say that the faculty that we have here are cooperative with each other, trust each other's judgments, and therefore are trusting of the advocacy that their colleagues make for their own students. Now, that is the kind of thing which I suppose comes from an environment of trust. And it's something that I've been happy to be associated with in my almost 13 years of association with Auburn. I think that every year we make another stride that is positive in that direction. Now, I don't know. Have I answered your question, Bakar? Or are you thinking of something more specific or more general?
Well, I was probably wanting to know if there is any extra mentorship group that will support students who are having problems that may prevent them from graduating or things like that.
Yeah. Well,
Can I add something?
go ahead, Byron.
Within the last year, we've really started focusing on, you sort of alluded to kind of like a bad fit relationship, maybe with an advisor and a student.
That's right, yes.
And that, we definitely don't want that situation for any student. You know, it's not good for the advisor, not good for the student. But those things, you know, can happen because you kind of have to make a decision, you know, in a short amount of time. And what we've started doing is we have a yearly committee review process now that we did not have prior. And what that does is it involves the students' advisory committee, which is an extra 3 other professors who are not the student's direct advisor, okay? And that is basically a mechanism where the student can have discussions with, it encourages them to have more discussions with their advisory committee outside of their advisor. If there is an issue, then they can bring it up. I mean, at any point, but certainly that yearly check-in is more sort of designed to try and make sure that those things are alleviated. In the past, we only did basically the oral exam, and then your PhD was when the committee got fully together.
When problems like that arise, it is usually the case that there is some kind of lack of communication. And by instituting these yearly reviews and having more pairs of eyes upon a particular case, we find that the communication between the students and the faculty has been improved. Just because people know that there are many resources in the department that they can take advantage of. I think that this has been an important reform.
Okay, thank you.
And I could maybe add one more recent initiative at the college level here at the College of Sciences and Mathematics, or kosam for short. We now have the institution of kosam champions, who are faculty, staff, and fellow graduate students who are engaged and trained into providing support, especially in these interpersonal issues and problems of an interpersonal nature. I think the nice thing about this resource is that there's someone who can help you, who you can talk to, who's not in a position of power with respect to the students, so that you can certainly speak candidly without any fear of, well, not that retaliation would happen otherwise, but there's no direct power. So that's another resource that has been a new thing at our college that can help resolve these kinds of conflicts.
Right, and just to add to that, Conrad, what I've seen recently is that actually as a graduate student, you can talk to a champion who is another graduate student in a different department of the college. So you even, you don't need to be confined to your department. You can go, let's say, to, I don't know, the Department of Engineering to talk to your fellow graduate student who is a champion, and that person can mediate a kind of communication between you and your supervisor, reporting, as Conrad said, reporting the problem higher in the hierarchy. So this is a great invention we have here.
Yep. It's worked out pretty well, I would say. Let's hear from a student perspective here. I noticed that Isaiah Spade has joined us, our national student representative of NOBCChE. Greetings, Isaiah.
How's it going, Dr. Ortiz?
Pretty well. Do you have any comments or things to ask or suggestions to make?
In terms of just the graduate experience, or getting in or staying in, or what?
Anything. I mean, you're a student, and your perspective is going to be a little bit different from ours.
Gotcha. Well, I guess, so I'll take it in 3 stages. The getting in, the staying in, and then the exit strategy. Right. So I guess the biggest thing in terms of the getting in portion is not even so much getting in, but it's more so finding a place that you fit and that you're comfortable. Because I looked around at a bunch of different universities. I had some opportunities, and some of them just didn't feel appropriate for me or the way that I wanted to develop and grow. And I had to really take my personal pathway to success into perspective when looking at graduate schools. Because, you're going to, wherever you go, as a student, you're going to go somewhere, you're going to do something amazing. You're going to end in 4.5 to 5 years with a book that's got your name on it, that's got your work in it. And so I would not be so hung up on, what the university's name is, more so where somebody is doing the work you want to do, where somebody is best suited to help you get to the career path that you want to get to, and where you are going to be valued and appreciated. Because grad school is very, very hard, and you don't want to deal with the added stress of, does my advisor want to keep me around, or when I take my candidacy exam, do I have to deal with, my advisor or my committee members not appreciating the work that I've done or appreciating me enough to help me get to that next stage? So in terms of not so much getting in, but getting in where you fit in, I take that type of perspective. In terms of staying in, take it one day at a time, because you're going to be there for a while. If you need a day on the weekend to just decompress, take that, because one day out of 5 years is not going to make make or break you. Take things a day at a time, one experiment, one day to clean glassware, one day to clean NMR tubes, one day to organize your samples. Just take it step by step, and maintain your mental health and your personal peace, as well as trying to strive for the things that you think are attainable, and making a plan of action with your advisor is really important as well. And all of that kind of culminates to the end game. And so my advisor told me, when you join a lab and when you get into grad school, you should be thinking thesis and thinking defending from day one, and not so much like I'm ready to get out of here, but more so how does each day build towards that end goal? How does each day make me more comfortable, make me more prepared as a scientist towards the end?
And I would add, I mean, Isaiah, you really have captured a lot of the experience right there. This reminds me of the hockey stick that I was going to tell you about. Of course, when you put that hockey stick down, the long end is down and just the little blade is sticking up. That, of course, is something we have compared to climate models and all kinds of stuff like that. But, in a way, it kind of resembles the apparent progress that you've made. It looks like it's flat for a long period of time. And as people approach that final defense, the last part of graduate school, things take off. Well, that's the way that it looks. But what the hockey stick model neglects is all the intellectual growth, all the intellectual ferment that makes that taking off possible at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, you could say it's like the Saturn rocket taking off. Okay, there's build up, build up, build up, build up, build up, burning all that fuel. But then at a certain point, you see that thing lifting off the ground. But if you don't have faith while you're building up to that, or if people are discouraging you while you're building up to that point, then problems can ensue. And that's, again, why I say that you have to be part of a good intellectual environment, people who believe in you, that are going to enable you to reach that critical exit velocity.
That's very true. It not only just comes in your group, but it comes as a whole in the department as well. Because I heard when I came in, I heard you guys talking about committees and such. I have gotten so much intellectual input from my committee members, but also the members of their group. Like there's a lab that's literally right next door that's connected, and on a day-to-day basis, we talk chemistry, but not only that, we talk life. We talk about progress that they're making, progress that I'm making, how we can best influence each other. They sit in on my practice exams and talks, I sit in on theirs. And even though we do drastically different chemistry, because our group is an inorganic and organometallic group, and their group does sugars, we're still able to discuss on an intellectual level, well, what did you learn from that experiment? And how can I learn what you've learned and maybe take that perspective and add it to my own work? So it's chemistry and science in general has become a lot more of a collaborative and community environment. And it's such a great time right now to get involved and to really like take that next step, because you're not alone. You come in with a class of people that are doing the same thing. You all may have different backgrounds, but when you set foot on that campus and you go through grad student orientation, everybody's looking at you as day one. They're not worried about all of the stuff that you did before, because past is prologue and you're writing a brand new book now. So it's all about what you do with that first page and how you continue to tell your story afterwards.
My console now has pictures of many PhDs, and I'll bet a lot of them can say the same thing that I can. I made a friend who was a fellow graduate student a long, long time ago. This fellow is now a professor in India. And you know what? His last email to me arrived on Tuesday, and it was long, and I'm going to send him back another one. You make friends for life very often in graduate school.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you are with me? Not respect. I mean, I think all the PhDs who are here. I think that there are probably a lot of stories like that, but you see where that it comes from. It comes from that kind of nurturing environment. Do we have any remarks from students or questions from students?
I guess I can say something. I definitely don't have that much of I have a very base knowledge of the process for going to graduate school, pursuing a PhD, and then whatever happens after that, after you have that said license to learn. And hearing this conversation has been encouraging because I think you mentioned a common misconception about getting a PhD. People think that they're looking for geniuses, but just like any other process, like getting an undergraduate degree or learning how to fly a plane or learning to perform surgeries, you're learning about experiences, and you're building upon your community intellectually, physically, professionally. And it's very interesting to see how Auburn's chemistry department, I guess, to see their perspective on this. It's very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, we don't expect you to be experts in chemistry already. That's the point of graduate school. You know, I would say very few people are born. You know, you sort of imagine sort of a Mozart or something who just knows how to play the piano all of a sudden. No one's born. You know, very few people are just going to have such an intuition for chemistry that they don't have to learn it.
You know something, Byron, you're reminding me something that Roald Hoffman told me when I was a postdoc. And that is that there are prodigies in music, and there are prodigies in mathematics, but there aren't really prodigies in history or in chemistry. You have to experience stuff.
Yeah.
There's no substitute for it.
So earlier I mentioned I did a postdoc program, so I had that misconception that I had to come into graduate school knowing exactly how to operate in a lab. And I thought that my lack of experience in research was going to hinder me from getting into a program. And quickly I learned that was not the point. I could have done without the postdoc. I'm glad I did it. I do not regret it. It was a life experience that I love. However, like I said, I came in organic. I now do inorganic chemistry, which is totally different. There's a lot of techniques that I had to learn along the way. I'm also doing computational chemistry. I have never touched a terminal Gaussian, taking computational chemistry courses or anything of that in undergraduate. That wasn't even an option. So I had a real crash course in it, and I have learned those skills. I'm even doing biology, so we are multidisciplinary in graduate school, and that is the aspect that I love. I have gained so many experience through graduate school that I would never have gained anywhere else. And every technique I have learned along the way, someone has been there by my side teaching me who is an expert in the field, knowing that I do not have that experience and trying to bring me up to the same level that they are.
Well, you know, we have some, I think Brendan Sperling's logo there says the name's Bond, and he has this little picture of James Bond there. And of course, James Bond has a license to kill. But as I emphasize again, as Gemonica has really shown too, she's got a license to learn.
Right.
He's using it.
Guys, we had a question in the chat about anything for prospective international students. Is there anything we could advise in procedural manner.
I think that we're probably, what I think we should do, Philip, there is just encourage additional contacts, because I fear that we're really running over time here. Actually, I guess that we had originally set this up for 3 to 4 o'clock. So I do want to be respectful of other people's time in this way. Is there anything that people would like to bring up that hasn't been brought up to this point?
If any of you guys are interested in learning more, especially from our international students, so the NOBCChE chapter here at Auburn is split down the middle with domestic and international students.
Right.
And so I will put our email in the chat. It's really simple. It's nobcche@auburn.edu. But if you guys have any questions, I will set you up with some contacts who are chemistry liaisons, and they'll give you the whole experience transitioning from an international setting to the US, how to go about the application process, how to go about housing, how to go about visas, how to go about everything that you possibly could have a question about. So just send us an email and we will be sure to get you in touch with the correct people.
Okay. All right, everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining in today. I hope that this has been informative, and I'm looking forward to additional contacts with all the people who have participated today. And I hope that everybody is clear about how to make them. I'll bid everyone goodbye for the time being, but this won't be forever, I hope. I hope that the contacts continue to be robust. So with that, have a wonderful day, everybody. And thanks again for attending our session.